Hi.
How's it going? You ever get so angry at the state of art school that you start a YouTube channel? Huh? Anybody else? Okay, this is a niche topic, but if you're gonna make a video on something, you might as well make it about something that you're passionate about and perhaps have some experience with. And I got both! So that's why I'm here. Considering this is my first video, hi, I'm Daphne. I am a 3D environment artist and I focus on stylized art for games. I graduated from art school in December of 2022 and I currently work at a place called Singularity 6 on a game called Palia. Before I started working as a 3D artist, I was a freelance pixel artist for roughly a year and a half. Mostly making like layouts and assets for Twitch streamers, but also for indie games and stuff like that. So if you count that experience, I have roughly 4 years of experience working in games. Couple disclaimers! Part of the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I'm a recent-ish grad from art school, and those feelings and experiences are still pretty fresh and potent and palatable. But with that being said, my experiences and opinions in this videos may vary differently from yours. While this is a video talking about the frustrations and fallbacks of art school regarding game art, an illustration major, for instance, at a completely different university is going to have had a very different experience. Even a game artist in a different school is going to have possibly a better or worse experience than I or others did. Everyone's experience, I think, is valid. I think that's a pretty good opinion to have. And if you had a great art school experience, especially if you were a game art student, that's awesome! I'm really glad! But part of the reason why this video exists is because at least in some or most game art programs, there appears to me to be a continuous cycle of crippling issues experienced by those that came before my time as a student, during, and still after, which is why I wanted to talk about it. A lot of great videos go into how to get into game art and if university is right for you, but I wanted to focus on the mindset of why students might feel pressured to go to art school for games, that whole kind of process, and then the common problems experienced once you're inside. Also, I've only been working in the industry full-time for a very short period of time compared to most devs. My opinions regarding the state of the industry is based on a very brief window of time. So someone who's been around, say, for like 15 years is no doubt going to have a much more well-rounded bit of knowledge and advice. And just in general, my experiences, as I said, are my own. Form your own opinions! That's really healthy to do! But at the same time, to anyone who's maybe considering art school for game art, or maybe you're going through it right now, I hope this video is at least relatable, maybe a bit insightful, so let's get this show on the road. Starting at the beginning, getting into art school for games might look a little something like this. You're 16, high school junior, full of stress, lots of homework, and if you're anything like me, a lot of Pop-Tarts. You figured out that you've wanted to make video games? I mean, what could be a better career than that? Been saying since I was 6 I wanted to make some Pokemon, so I guess this is the logical next step. Something like Googling will bombard you with advertisements that shove pretty pictures of students smiling in front of a desktop screen with some sort of caption like, "Don't just be a gamer, make the game." I still get these ads even now, like, good lord. And considering societal pressures to go to college, for many this seems like the right step. From here, it kind of splits into what aspect of game development you want to dive into, and for me, that was art. I was in the trenches of DeviantArt at 11 years old, so we all know where life was going to lead me. For many of us, this leads us into taking classes to prep us for that art school experience, if we have those classes available. Of course, not every high school is the same, and with art courses getting cut more often than not from high school, some students may not have access to art education at all. So in that case, you're making your admissions portfolio on your own time. Good luck! Just about every college requires a portfolio in some realm or form to even get accepted or even have your application looked at. Whether that portfolio is specific to the major you're applying to or just shows your art skills at like a broad breadth, they just want to see what you can do and where your eye is. That can kind of depend on the school. In my senior year of high school, I abandoned band, which I had been doing for about 7 years, and discarded my trusty clarinet just so I could take more art credits my senior year. Mr. Steele, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry. I did this all in an attempt to get myself more prepared, get work on my portfolio, and do it through classes rather than outside of them, and overall just look like a good candidate when admissions started rolling around. But above all else, what is the best thing you could do? Well, that might just be AP Art. Now, the big difference with AP Art is that instead of taking an exam in the spring with like a 5-point grading system, you build a portfolio designed around a theme to deliver in a thick envelope on the hope of 2 things. 1, you get a score between 3 and 5, which counts as a passing score. And 2, you also get some college credit out of this. So perhaps there's a class or 2 that you don't end up having to take in college, which can help you in the long run. Plus, this is a great opportunity to work on that portfolio. I mean, these classes are really intense. You're surrounded by a ton of gifted artists in your class, and you can make a lot of friends. So there's a lot of bonuses with that. But that being said, it is still really intense. You only have a handful of months to really get all this stuff done, so it is crunch time, baby. It's like they've been prepping you for the industry already. So between your other classes, assignments outside of this portfolio project, the portfolio itself, who knows what else you got going on in your life, it can be a lot. Compounded on top of this is like the stress of applying to art colleges. Different application requirements, again, depend on the school, and at the end of the day, it really feels like you're praying to numerous higher powers that just one of them lets you in, please, please. There's only a limited number of spots, realistically, especially for the universities that are on the smaller side. And if you lived in an area like I do, where you basically only have 1 or 2 options, if you don't want to move out of state, the stakes can kind of seem a little high, especially if you had a perfectionist of an AP Art teacher like I had. No good memories from her. So it's safe to say you're stressed. What else is new from the life of a high school student? It seems like everything in your life has led to this moment, and if you don't get in and also get a big enough scholarship to cover tuition, you're screwed. Toast. Game over. Destroyed. Desolate. Oh, what's that? Oh, you got in! Yay, worrying for like 6 months to a year for nothing, you did it. The problem I ran into and what I witnessed in my AP classmates is that we were going to get in. The actual skill necessary to get accepted was actually much lower than what admissions counselors were initially telling you, almost to try and gas up the college and make it out to be so much more of a prestigious establishment than it actually is. Overall, I found that if you cared enough to put a semi-cohesive portfolio together, you were getting in. I remember a specific turning point senior year where I was sitting down with like an admissions counselor from a school that I was applying for. Universities will kind of like send them in to kind of like scope you out. It's kind of weird looking back on it. They'll send them to speak to you, give you advice, kind of look over your portfolio a couple times every time they come in. I was talking with her about how stressed I was about worrying that I just wasn't going to get in, and she just looked at me point blank. Oh, you're getting in. Huh? Could you have at least told me that a few months ago? This isn't the first time we've spoken, lady, and not the first time that you've seen my portfolio either, which, mind you, was a photography portfolio. Had nothing to do with game art, and that was eating away at me every night. Do you have any idea how many sleepless nights I had editing photos until the Photoshop logo was engraved into my eyeballs? And you didn't tell me that I was most likely going to get in until now? So that was an eye-opener for sure. With the stress I was putting on myself, constantly comparing my work to that of those around me who were 10 times as talented, combined with my cruddy APR instructor polluting the room with thoughts that we're all not good enough unless we live, breathe, and art, I was beat, relieved, but tired. All I have to do now is send in my application, sign away my soul for however much this is gonna cost. We can worry about that later. Go to art school for 3 to 4 years, make a new portfolio, and get a job. Gonna be making video games in no time. So as you may have guessed, it's a lot more complicated than that. First off, college is expensive. No matter if you're going to art school, standard university, law school, getting a master's or doctorate, whatever it is going to be pricey. And that can be stressful to think about how in the world you're going to pay for all of this. This isn't really the video to dive into the horror of how college in the US is horrifically expensive and setting up our youth for a perpetual financial crisis. But I can't make a video about going to school for game art without mentioning the cost. Depending on the art school you go to, you're looking at anywhere from roughly $30K to $200K $200,000 for tuition when it's all said and done. Now, this depends on the cost per credit, any grants or scholarships you get, and the amount of time you are in school, which can sometimes be longer than you anticipate or are led to believe. Shout out to all the transfer students who got screwed over. And that's without calculating other costs such as room and board, moving to a new state or city, cost of supplies, gas if you're commuting, food. I mean, it's a hefty price tag no matter how you slice it, which is important to take into account as we delve into what the Game Art college experience provides for that price tag. Now, when I was originally getting settled and picking between colleges, there were a couple of red flags. Unfortunately for me, I had a thick, big boy, a pair of rose-tinted glasses on, mostly due to the fact that the idea of getting to pick between colleges was mind-blowing for me at the time. I was still thinking that I was going to have to get on my hands and knees and beg to grace the halls of at least one fine learning establishment. And now I get to pick from a litter? I guess dreams do come true. Reflecting back, these red flags look something like this. University website bragging about numerous recent high-profile alumni from other programs, but the few Game Art alumni of note graduated a decade and a half ago. University website bragging about internship opportunities, but of the companies listed, not a single one is a game studio. University website bragging about state-of-the-art custom studio space for students, only for Game Art students to either not have studio space assigned to them, only get that space when they are a senior, or having to share said space with another major, who already has their own private lab space. University website either not showing student work from their Game Art program, or finding that the stuff they do show is questionable. University website. Okay, you get the point. Most of the selling points featured in college flyers and website material was highlighting features for the other majors. They're big sellers, if you will. At my college, for instance, the vibe that I got is that our big sellers were things like transportation design. But it was often presented in a way that kind of made you assume, oh, they have internship programs. Well, surely I'll get an internship through the university. State-of-the-art custom computer labs. Well, hot diggity dog, the Game Art ones must be sick. Only for the actual support that you received as a Game Art student to be very lackluster and poorly funded. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get into that a little later in the video. Besides there being just general propaganda surrounding these colleges, there were some experiences I remember having that weren't setting off alarm bells at the moment, but certainly do now looking back. For example, talking with an admissions counselor for a university that I was looking into and constantly getting confused as an animation student. Look, those guys are cool. Animation people watching, I don't know how you do what you do, but it is so cool. An honor to be confused as one of you. But that's not what I'm doing. Admissions counselor person, could you please remember that? Thank you. I corrected her half a dozen times. Would it have hurt to remember what I'm actually declaring on my major? I know she's talking to a lot of people, but I feel like you would remember the 5 Game Art students from this high school or whatever it was. Do I have to wear my game theory shirt every single meeting to get that across? Will that help? I'll do it. I don't care. Another standout moment was at a hearing where you could ask like the department heads like different questions depending on like what major you were going to, like that stuff, specific stuff for that. And I remember like this one guy asking, I've been to 2 colleges before this one, and I still cannot find a job in games. What about this university will set me up for success? You've been to 2 what now already, my friend? And I gotta say, the response was such a nothing burger that I can't even remember what the response really was. It was safe to say that at the time, I was blind to the storm that was kind of looming overhead as I picked the school to go to. I was just happy to be here, man. Put AP art behind me and get ready to make some friends, make games together, and become a concept artist. Well, I made some friends, so I guess 1 for 3 is good enough, right? So you picked your school! Yay! Good for you. You signed loan papers. Got that cosigner. Thanks, Pop. I love you. You got a cool video game t-shirt so people can tell exactly what major you are without asking. And all the prep work and moving, if you had to move, all that cool stuff is done and over with. The games begin. Now, one of the things I didn't realize initially is the different credit types that you have in art school and how many of each type you have to take in order to fulfill your degree requirements. This isn't necessarily too different from my understanding from like a standard university. But these categories include like major credits, so classes that are geared towards your major, foundational credits, some basic foundation courses that you're going to most likely take in the majority of like your freshman year, maybe a bit of your sophomore year, and general credits. These are basically everything else, such as required English, math, history, or science courses that you are required to have fulfilled in order to graduate. When I got my first class list, I was enamored by classes called 3D Techniques, Digital Design, Composition 1. The idea of being able to take all art classes now, semester after semester, it was mind-boggling. Hard to believe. I was in heaven. The glasses were still on, the rose-tinted ones. They were thick on there. Well, that's because the names were rather misleading. Turns out none of these courses were actually relevant to the degree I was pursuing. My first semester only had one class that was an entertainment art credit, which was the umbrella kind of category that game art was featured under, along with cool dudes like animation and film. The rest of these courses I ended up finding out were those pesky foundation and general courses that weren't doing me a whole lot. That composition class wasn't on art composition, it was for writing composition. I love to write, don't get me wrong, I wrote a whole script one night just for this video because I was so passionate about it. But like, I'm here to learn about game art though, dude. 3D Techniques wasn't an intro to 3D modeling software, but instead a wood and metal shop course. Digital Design taught the basics of Photoshop and Illustrator, but as someone in a background in basic photography and graphic design, you know, the portfolio that I submitted to get into this art school, I did not learn a single new concept in those 15 weeks, and nothing in that class was specific towards game design. One saving grace, one class I briefly mentioned, it was sort of a basic storytelling class. We did not do any software exploration or discuss basic terms within game design specifically. It was more film and animation focused than anything, because that's what the majority of students in that class were studying. I mean, it was fun at least. I had a good time, so I mean, in the moment it felt nice. Honestly felt like I was being gaslit, just being grateful that I had one class that sometimes talk about game art, but hey, maybe I'm being too harsh. So first semester comes and goes, and I still don't know what Unreal Engine is, but that's okay, that's fine. That'll come up in second semester, right? Wrong. So second semester comes in strong with not one, but 2 whole classes dedicated to my major. Now that's what I'm talking about, baby. Believe it or not, it was actually supposed to be 1. But I had a scheduling mix-up and ended up swapping a foundational credit for a major credit for the time being, so I consider myself a lucky duck. I started with my first intro to 3D modeling, which introduced the fun concept of, oh, so that's how they got Mario in there. Which included highlights such as, we take the whole semester to make 1 GameCube. And that's it. 15 weeks. 1 GameCube. A cube. A cubelet. No modeling fundamentals. Only cube. Moving on to the other class that was apparently major adjacent was a class focusing on environment design and character design. Yeah, it was an animation class in sheep's clothing. Maybe if you were a concept art student, you could have used it. So the fact that it was basically an animation class in disguise is something I actually have a big problem with when it comes to game art curriculum. Basically stolen classes from other majors or tracks because there just aren't enough game courses. I saw this numerous times at my university, and it's a problem I see plaguing other game art curriculums across the globe. Other students or ex-students that I speak with talk about this problem a lot. It's a game art track, yeah, but it's not nearly as custom tailored as it should be when compared to tracks of similar majors at the same institution, such as animation, film, if you got concept art. In my experience, it's often classes from those majors that are squeezed in. Squeezing them in, like filling the gaps that they are lacking. And by the time you realize that that's what they are, it's too late. You're already 5 weeks into the course, wasting another credit hour on something that just isn't benefiting you. What, are you gonna drop out of the course? Well, even if you did, it's not like there's much to replace it with anyway, and you're not even entitled to a full refund of the course at that point. Most likely, depending on your college, but they make these things go super fast. You want a refund, you gotta go back the next day after the first class. And when you take into account your schedule being bloated up with dozens of required foundation and general courses that you just don't have any control over, the actual amount of game art related curriculum that is offered to you is slim pickings. And that's assuming what is available is actually related to the specific aspects of game art of your choice. Remember when I said I wanted to be a concept artist? Ha! Well, that didn't happen. As I explored 3D art, I fell in love with the idea of environment art instead, and I was quick to ditch 2D altogether for my new passion, tree and rock. Now, what if I had wanted to stick to concept art, or say I had chosen something different, such as becoming a character artist, for instance, or going into VFX? Well, the pickings were even more slim, my friend. For those of us that picked environment art or prop art, we were lucky that the small amount of classes available to us usually had a professor with that as their background, and the assignments were environment or prop based. But there wasn't a branching path within the game art track that like splits up the environment artist from the character artist from the tech artist. Nope, nothing like that. Because remember, there aren't enough game art classes to begin with. So what ends up happening is you all take the same courses, and 90% of them are tailored to either environment art, something adjacent in there, or 3D generalism. Colleagues of mine who were, for example, character artists had to take extra time out of their already crammed schedule with school to learn how to make their own character. They had to learn what proper topology was, what ranking was as a concept, the entire character art pipeline. If they were lucky, they got to have one course maybe with a professor on campus who knew the pipeline, but you just better hope he is teaching that class in a semester where you're available to like fit it in. Worst case scenario, and one that I think is fairly common, there is no course here relevant to you at all. For concept art, for example, you were better off going into illustration or one of the fine art programs because the amount of curriculum in game art that forced you to do 3D and nothing else was about 90% of the course. Side note, there are plenty of concept artists who obviously use 3D in their pipeline. It is a fantastic skill for anybody to learn if you're going into game development, and I believe, bias alert, it's super fun. The problem I have isn't so much that you're being taught 3D, but it's the amount of time these courses took up. It left no room for students to develop their concept art portfolio. They're stuck in 3D land with me. And if it's something that you're just not passionate about or that's not your focus, I mean, that can be a drag. If the roles were reversed and I was forced to do concept art all the time, I'd be crawling back to Autodesk Maya begging them to take me back. It's okay, I take it back. You can crash as many times as you want. Just please let me model something. This is all to say that in a perfect world, the curriculum would be exactly as we dreamed it would be. Game art. Not film. This is game, not film. Game art. And within that discipline, there would ideally be courses that introduce concepts like environment art, character art, concept art, VFX, tech art, level design, etc. And they allow you to further dive into those disciplines as you carry on and advance in your studies. But even if that was true, what glaring issues are we still facing? Can't talk about college without professors, like talk about peanut butter without some jam. A concept that's just as bad, in my opinion, as a poor list of courses are lackluster professors that teach you within said program. I think no matter what you go to school for, you're going to run into a professor that you just don't agree with, or just doesn't jive with you, or maybe just cannot teach. Like, everyone learns in a different style, I think. I mean, for me, for example, I have to see and hear and then do in order to understand. Everyone's a little bit different. So maybe it's a professor that just doesn't teach in a way that's optimal for you, so you struggle a little bit. That's acceptable. That's to be understood. It is very hard to be a teacher. So that's part of life. You're not gonna adore and learn great things from everyone that you meet. But game art degrees just have a very interesting problem, however, in that a lot of professors out there aren't exactly qualified. In my experience, first coming into contact with a dodgy professor was in my second semester, first introduction to 3D. Oh, this won't go bad at all. It was the first time teaching, and their only credential appeared to be that they lived in the area, could teach between the hours of 4 and 7, and knew how to open up Autodesk Maya. So the instruction, as you may have guessed from my tone here, was god-awful. It's well established that learning 3D, whether you're learning it in Maya, Blender, 3ds Max, what have you, it can be tough to comprehend. Ideally, you would ease the class into slowly the concepts of like 3D. What you can do, like think about it in the way of like slowly stepping into a pool. You start off like from the kiddie pool side and then you slowly sink into the deep end. I don't know, here's an idea. Start with some presentations. Outline basic concepts and terms. A roadmap of what you're gonna go over and what we're gonna model. Nope! GameCube. GameCube now. Cube, game, 15 weeks, you, me, that's it. Basically, this professor had a habit of showing us like 2-hour demos of how to model a GameCube or parts of the GameCube. It was overwhelmingly complicated when it just didn't need to be. But it was really all incorrect. The model was not optimized. UVs were stretched and edges split so that every single face was its own UV island. It was at least like 30k tries if I had to guess. And I don't believe anyone who says otherwise. I mean, that thing was a monster. It's my sleep paralysis demon. But honestly, the worst part, the professor didn't record his lectures and he did not allow us to follow along as he was giving his presentation. So we just sat there, watched the guy who was basically speaking another language to us, because at that point I was still trying to put together what the heck is a UV. Imagine being new to 3D. We've all been there at some point. Those were the gates of hell. And being asked to absorb 2 hours of content that you cannot watch again and spit it back out onto your desktop like waving a magic wand. Impossible. We barely understood the concept of modeling and working in a 3D space. What the hell do you mean extrude the face, Tony? If you somehow had the memory of a robot and could follow this demo step by step, you know, getting by more or less, fantastic. Except, gosh golly forbid you asked this dude a question. I remember one of my friends asking too many questions that the professor just gave up answering the poor guy. He threw a hissy fit and completely stopped helping him. Like, you are the professor. You are hired. You are an employee, even. A paid teacher, and you're supposed to answer questions. What did you think that this was gonna be like? The problem could have been completely avoided if the professor was properly vetted and had clearly gained some experience in not only modeling for like game art, which clearly was not their background, but also like mentoring students. The best professors I had at my university were not only incredibly well versed in their craft of choice, but willing to go the extra mile to answer questions, solve a problem, or work with the student to figure out the answer if they themselves just didn't know. It was the combination of lack of experience between game art principles and straight up teaching etiquette that plagued this program to a degree I found infuriating. The extra little layer added to this, and what is honestly one of the only golden rays of hope, is the professors at these institutions that do care, that do go the extra mile, that do know how to teach. They exist! And if you're watching this, you know who you are. I can't thank you enough for the hard hours and endless commitment that you give to your students, often being paid not nearly enough for the impact that you have. It is because of the few but great teachers I had that I'm an environment artist to begin with, because they didn't give up on me. I want to highlight them for a moment, because the way that this system works doesn't just harm students, but good faculty as well. From my experience, if you have a wonderful professor who just gives it their all, surrounded by many who are not qualified, it's those that are qualified that then have to go back and correct their mistakes. For example, I was taught in my first semester of sophomore year that you unwrap only by using camera views? Up, down, left, that's your right. Right, I don't know. Front, back, that was it. That was the only option. I didn't even know what really unfold was. So I was tediously basically going through and selecting individual faces that were the closest to one of those 6 viewpoints. Unwrapping them then from that angle. It wasn't until the next semester when I finally had a course called Game Art that my professor showed me how to properly unwrap in 15 minutes. Off the clock, by the way. They took time after the end of class to do this for me. To say that I was stunned that it could be that quick was an understatement. So much wasted time. Now for me, that was a quick fix. One bad habit is easily unlearned. But what about the countless other bad habits that we all pick up when learning a new skill that then have to be untaught and retaught correctly by professors that care? It gets harder when it's a complex skill that a student already has a hard time understanding, so they might need numerous tries to actually get it right and get it to stick. Furthermore, And even then, that doesn't stop the same cruddy professor who taught this technique from teaching the next batch of students that comes in the same bad technique all over again. A constant conveyor belt of techniques having to be unlearned and fixed by those that actually care, while those teaching incorrectly just carrying on because they're not held accountable nor held to any standard. Overall, game art as a curriculum is plagued with bad professors who are teaching incorrectly, not teaching things at all, leaving those students behind. I mean, there's a point to be made that you are your best advocate, and it's your responsibility to seek out correct information and build your own knowledge. That I understand. That's a responsibility you cannot shed as a student. But if you're paying $100K, for instance, for a school to help you, the least they could do is be accurate? Steer you in the right direction? I don't know. Is this a crazy concept? For those that are lucky enough to meet a professor that cares, there's a concern that with the way things are, that professor is going to get burnt out eventually. Especially those of you who put the weight of the program on your shoulders. I see you. It can be hard to want to be the beacon of light in a program that isn't built to support you as an educator and students as students. It's a weird concept for a school. And I think a lot of people can relate to being burnt out by a system where it seems like you don't gain anything by trying to be better, especially when others are skating by with not caring, or at least that's how it appears to be. The system is already broken when it comes to curriculum, and now we have a faculty issue too. So what about all the other stuff? So I want us to circle back to what I mentioned earlier about art school being expensive, because this is where it really starts to hurt. One of the upsides of going to university is having a plethora of industry standard software at your fingertips for free. Well, you're paying for it, but just like, not immediately. That's Future Bee's problem, and she'll certainly take care of that. At least that's supposed to be how it is, like straightforward, easy plus, and yet you will still run into issues. For example, we couldn't get ZBrush on personal desktops for student use, because the school just didn't offer that. So if you had to sculpt, you either bit the bullet and purchased ZBrush on your own accord, or you only sculpted on campus when computer labs were available and open, which depending on your situation could be seriously inconvenient hours and availability. Then you had software that was only specific to a limited number of desktops at the university, so if you needed it, you had to pray to God that that desktop was available. This is one of the reasons why I've yet to learn Marmoset. It was something exclusive to only a handful of desktops at my university, and with so much already on my plate, I shelved learning it because the lack of availability made it yet another hurdle I just wasn't willing to jump over. And it's something I'm going to be making up for now. Then we have the issue with actual computer labs themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, there can be quite an impressive number of computers, but being in game art specifically, we had more hurdles to jump over compared to our brother and sister majors. These included no game art specific lab compared to animation and film, who had their own labs, having a communal lab to share with the different disciplines, but it being first come, first served. So you could encounter a situation where you need a computer, but there's a big animation file. So all the animation students are hogging the communal lab and their own private lab. Said communal lab being restricted to sophomores and seniors. This is to help with overcrowding, but if you're a freshman wanting to work on your projects, you just had to pray that the general labs were open and available for use. There were computers inside of classrooms that one could use, but only between class periods, which could be 30-minute windows if the room was booked all day. Or perhaps at inconvenient times, or said computers just didn't have the software that you needed. I mean, I was lucky enough to have a laptop that worked well enough that I could work on it at any time, but that wasn't the case for most people, so they were at the mercy of just the ecosystem of how computers worked. And it just kind of gets compounded the more you realize that you're just not being treated the same as other majors, and boy does it get worse. Woohoo! So you're a junior or senior, getting close to your prime, time to get some experience. Yeah, well, good luck getting help with that. Internships are often a rite of passage for art students of any discipline, and in some universities, they are a requirement for graduation, which boggles my mind just because of how hard it is to get an internship most times. But if you're in game art, oftentimes you're on your own. Get ready for a career office not understanding what the heck you even do or study. I just don't understand how a college can offer a degree in something that their career office doesn't even understand. Now, I went to college in the Midwest, and I don't know if you've noticed, but Los Angeles is way over there. The Midwest isn't exactly the hotspot of the entertainment industry. We got corn, And cars, baby. So career development offices by and large are already at a disadvantage. Not their fault that Hollywood 2.0 decided not to settle down 25 miles outside of Detroit. See, there can be numerous times where events are created and hyped up for game art as part of collaborative industry events or some sort of portfolio day, where you're going to get the chance to show off your portfolio, speak with recruiters, all that jazz. And these events are hyped up as you are going to get a job or an internship. You just have to do the work to get in, and if accepted into the event, pay $200 to hang up your cool work. Oh god, I'm getting college application flashbacks over again. Please, I don't want to apply to anything anymore. So with all this hype, everyone applies, people get in, do the hard work to set up their spots on the show floor, all while juggling their heavy course load too, by the way, only to find out that there are no game companies coming to the event. What? In fact, there are recruiters from all the other majors, just nothing for game art. I personally didn't do any of the in-person networking events like this when I was in university. I was a junior/senior at the times when COVID was peaked, so the things that I were offered were often online events that sucked in their own right. And at that point, I was just so burnt out that I didn't want to do anything in person like that again. But those that did do these types of events kind of regret it. For some, it was so bad that they didn't even bother to participate their senior year, and I kind of can't blame them. Again, if the career office cannot wrangle in people from game studios to fly into these events, why should the game art students go? I mean, they're spending so much money to hang up their stuff that this doesn't seem right. You can't tell them, hey, come to this event and you'll totally get an internship at Blizzard or something, and then nobody from Blizzard shows up, or no one in games at all. It wouldn't even be so bad if these events were just honest, like, sorry, no game studios this time around. But often when the students were the ones to call them out on it, they get a passive-aggressive response back. Well, you should just be thankful that we put it on for you in the first place. I'm sorry. What? Students often have to pay out of pocket for these things. You know, setting up their own displays, that stuff takes time out of time that they could use on their own projects and for their portfolio, only to then be standing around for hours at an event that didn't even have a single person that was interested in their work, and they're supposed to be thankful. Along a similar vein, funding for events like GDC is historically not fantastic. You have students often in other majors getting study abroad programs, perhaps every year, depending on the university. You know, these traveling events that are mostly paid for. I understand that, you know, sometimes there might be a further upfront cost, but, you know, these things are more plentiful for these types of students with the most popular major. But then game art is stuck with 10 slots in a Hunger Games style battle for a chance to go to GDC. But oh, by the way, the student still has to fund it themselves. I'm really starting to wonder where the 200K is going, man. And that's if your school informs you about events like GDC, which I've come to find out not all of them do. A close friend of mine who is weeks away at this point from graduation, I was just talking with them about GDC and they're like, what is that? What are they teaching you at this school, my guy? There's a debate to be had whether or not GDC is worth the cost, and damn, look at those ticket prices. It is certainly not something that you have to do. I've never gone. I would love to, but the cost and time and life got in the way. You know, it's not, you know, not everyone has to go. But can the resource at least be there? Or at the very least, could you just tell them that it exists? Is this how low the bar should be? I don't know. So this leaves students to, you guessed it, they figure it out for themselves. Applying themselves, finding out about contests, searching day and night for internships or job opportunities at entry level, funding their own trips and networking opportunities if they can afford it. There's so much more that universities could be doing to, you know, provide these opportunities for students, educate them about the industry and what they should expect. You know, where should they be applying? Where should they post their work? What they should get involved in. You would expect them to be in the know, at least regarding major recurring internships that happen every year, like Insomniac, Blizzard, Riot. Those are ones that come to mind just off the top of my head. But I find that unless you're lucky to have a fantastic mentor to tell you about all of these resources, all of these job boards, all of these events, all of these contests, or you're proactive enough to look for yourself, which can be hard when you don't even know what you're looking for, schools often leave their students fantastically uninformed. Oh. Where do we go from here? Kind of at a depressing point in the video. Whoopsie. So let's list some key takeaways. The pressure to attend art school kind of starts well into high school, and that pressure can set up false expectations, or at its worst, a lot of just praying and hoping art school is going to give me the job itself. Schools often aren't setting up students for success. Curriculum is jumbled, mistaught, or in some cases, non-existent. The impact that great professors provide is often drowned out by the negative impact of unqualified and uninspired professors. Game art students aren't receiving the same support as other students in areas like job fairs, portfolio events, interview prep, and job/internship searching. I kind of want to circle back to why I made this video in the first place. And upon first glance, hey Dav? You're venting again about problems you haven't had to deal with in 2 years. You doing okay? Okay, seriously, I'm making this because I care a lot. Education is something that is very important to me, and I, as well as my peers, experienced a lot of frustration at the curriculum we attended, and a lot of fear because we felt ill-equipped to even understand what we had gotten ourselves into until we were knee-deep and realizing that this industry is just so competitive. I mean, there were many times I was laying awake at night worried I just was not learning what I needed to in order to break it in. Furthermore, there are people that I know that are still in school, you know, friends of mine. It hasn't been too long since I graduated, so a lot of people that I know are about to graduate and, you know, enter the job force. And it extra hurts when I'm hearing, you know, these people that I care about talk about not understanding super basic concepts that they should have learned years ago. Like, that blows my mind and makes me afraid for them. I mean, that fear might be a relatable feeling, especially for those of you who are currently students or those fresh out of the womb of education trying to find a job right now. I am not at a point where I kind of want to start giving back to this community as much as I can. I see myself eventually going into mentoring or teaching at a school one day, and hopefully being as good as the ones that instilled, you know, that bit of hope in me, and hopefully keep students informed about things that they should be informed about and excited about learning the wonders of game art, because it really is a wonderful profession. It's stressful, but God, I love making those cubes. I want to balance like realism with healthy expectations and hopefully instill, you know, that you have to still do a lot of hard work, you know, to do this stuff, but, you know, still provide affirmation. One of the recurring patterns I saw looking back is that, especially early on, I didn't always have someone giving me a heads up about what navigating this space was gonna be like. I wanted to make games, but what does that even mean? What part of games do I want to be involved in? What classes do I need to be taking? What do I need to learn? And should I trust a college to define that path blindly? So, by airing out what some might see as a little bit of dirty laundry, I hope to at least provide some perspective that can be digested and maybe chewed on a bit. I do not have all of the answers. This video isn't necessarily to point out, oh, do this is the solution right here. Because not every avenue is one size fits all. You can argue that screw university, it's a scam, learn on your own, but you can also argue that many have taken this path and succeeded, so why not do it? It's a dilemma I personally struggle with when I'm asked, should I go to art school or is art school worth it? Because it's a complicated question with a loaded answer. Yes and no. On one hand, most schools are inherently flawed, you know, teaching incorrect or outdated information, plagued with lack of funding and care, and overall just don't get a majority of students where they need to be to break into the industry by the time they graduate, especially at a time like now with thousands of layoffs. I mean, that stuff just cannot be ignored. Sometimes with how bad I hear these programs can get, it feels like students are being set up for failure. We are now in a place where no one is safe from layoffs, and students who have already chosen a very competitive field are now competing with senior devs who have been laid off just as they are graduating. I mean, things have got to feel dire if you are a student right now. They already feel dire and horrible as a dev. But on the other hand, university offers an unmatched landscape to network and make lifelong friends. It gives you the opportunity to explore who you are as an artist in game dev. I mean, there's a reason I went from concept art to environment art. It's because I had the opportunity to explore what this all meant and find a discipline that actually fit who I was as an artist more, and I would have never even imagined it. I hated drawing landscapes and now I love modeling them. It provides an in-person structured curriculum that is often a lifeline for those who have a hard time learning online. A lot of students need that in-person instruction, and I can't blame them for it. It's often the best you're gonna get when it's really good. So it's a tough call, and one that needs to be made on a case-by-case basis. Like, what kind of student are you? What are you hoping to get out of this? What is going to be the cost, and is that a realistic debt that you can bear? What school are you considering, and how can they realistically provide? Ask those schools, those curriculum people that you, what are they called? The counselors. Ask them uncomfortable questions. Please, your future can depend on it. Don't do the glasses thing that I did. For a long time, I let my choice of university sort of answer these questions for me, and it was only once I had those glasses taken off that I was lucky enough to have a mentor to kick my butt in gear, get a move on, and make a really good portfolio. Not everybody that is in school is going to be at the right place at the right time to meet that great mentor. If I could go back in time, I would go to college all over again. Yes, despite everything negative I've said in this video, but for 3 reasons that are unique to me. 1, the people that I met were some of the loveliest bunch, and the idea of not having them in my life is quite frankly horrendous. 2, getting a degree opens up the path to working internationally for me, which is something that is on track with my personal goals. And 3, it worked for me and my style of learning. I was one of the lucky few who got a job before I graduated, and I want to emphasize that luck and privilege. I had a lot of support from my family and peers, and I was able to dedicate 100% of my time to school, all while having a lot of guidance from great professors who stood out amongst the sea of ones. That is not the case for most students. Some do not have that support system. Some have to work a part or full-time job while they are in school. And many of those who have graduated in recent years don't yet have a job in games, and the landscape is looking more and more unstable with each passing month with these layoffs. If I wasn't as lucky as I am, I don't know if it would have been worth it. Probably not, which sucks to say because I have a lot of great memories of going to college, but again, that's not necessarily because of the university, but it's because of the people who were going through it with me. Look, I'm not in any position to make someone's decisions for them, but rather I want to keep potential students and current students informed and open up the dialogue for how to improve the educational landscape of game art degrees. Try to give another voice for what students should consider and expect. Ultimately, I want people to be more informed than I was, and not to glorify art school like some sort of deity that has control whether or not you get to make games. Education for game artists certainly doesn't have to be this bad, and I think that by recognizing it, talking about it, and giving the power of knowledge to potential students, they'll speak with their time and their wallets. There are other pathways of education in any aspect of game art. Just look at awesome courses given by the folks at CGMA, for instance. They're not only affordable when compared to university courses, but they're in-depth, taught well, and have results. A friend of mine is currently attending a sort of like similar like boot camp style structure with a program that is well known for churning out superb artists that are ready to enter the industry in like 2 years. That's crazy. And this is after she went to school with me for like about 5 years. The amount of improvement I've seen in the last few months from her compared to, you know, that stretch of 5 years at university is insane. You know, she is killing it right now. If this is the kind of stuff offered at like a non-accredited, sort of like unconventional program, I do not see why colleges can't do better. I'm sorry, I really can't. If you're a dean of a college that can somehow enlighten me on how like a 5K experience can give you so much more to offer than a $200,000 one at your university, gladly tell me and I'll put my foot in my mouth, I swear. But like, the math ain't mathin', honey. Okay. I don't want to end this video on a depressing note, so let's get some good vibes. If you're a game art student, keep chugging away, my friend. Choo-choo. The best piece of advice I can give you is to give it all you got. No degree or piece of paper is going to give you a job. That is something earned, but it's something anyone can achieve if they do the hard work and create a killer portfolio and just give themselves time. And just be honest with yourself. Is your work at the level of a junior in your discipline? If not, then what are the steps that you can take to get there? Being honest and looking at your work critically is going to help you go far. You know, take it one step at a time, pace yourself, but just keep moving forward. It is a marathon, not a sprint. There are a ton of resources online that you can utilize to educate yourself. A lot of them for free on YouTube, which is pretty sweet. I'm gonna try and highlight some down below that I think are really kind of cool. Granted, mine are going to be kind of more biased to like stylized environment art because that's what I know. But if I see anything in a discipline that is outside of that I think is like really solid stuff, I will also link it down there. And also there are some fantastic game devs that are currently making some cool videos that I recommend checking out. So I'm going to put those guys at the top of the description, and maybe here if I figure out how this linking stuff works, because I think they're pretty cool. I like what they talk about, even if it's not just game art stuff. Go look at their stuff. Yeah. And, yeah. Thanks for watching me rant. Maybe I'll cover more game topics. I don't know. Just thinking about, doing something more like not depressing. I don't know. If you have any ideas, let me know. I'm new to this. I'm trying out a new hobby, like maybe a Firewatch deep dive, because I love that game. This is my one allotted extroverted moment of the month, so I guess you'll be seeing me in April. We say bye-bye. We say bye-bye. Yay! GameCube can't hurt you, it's not real.